We're good. We're live. Welcome everyone to a special council meeting. And may I have a mover and seconder for the agenda? Councillor Bachman and Councillor Keith, that the special council meeting agenda for April 6th be approved as circulated. Anyone opposed to that? Nope, that's carried. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest? No? Okay. Correspondence, Ms. Johnson.
Your Worship, there is one item of correspondence on this special meeting this evening, and it relates to an item on the agenda. The item of correspondence is from Janice Dupuy, Deputy Clerk of West Nipissing. It's a resolution from the municipality of support for vaccine allocation to be prioritized to public health unit regions that are still in phase 1. And as I said, there's an item on the agenda related to that. It's item 951.
Perfect, thank you. We're doing reports in the next meeting, so we're going to go to item 911. And it's moved by Councillor Burden and seconded by Councillor Borneman. The council revises the confidential WSIB Schedule 1 employer memo, and the council authorizes staff to transition to a Schedule 1 employer with WSIB. Mr. Harris, do you want to, or Alicia, do you want to say anything about this particular one?
I think the key points here would be that in 2018, the Workplace Safety and Insurance Act changed their legislation in how they administer certain claims for certain groups of employees. And so as a result of that, there are some situations in which the employer, being the town of Parry Sound, would be presumptive, meaning that there would be no reason or no opportunity to say, no, we don't think that that claim is work related. And so we would be responsible for assuming those costs. So as a result of that, our current insurance provider has taken a look at their situation and said that they no longer are in a position to provide this type of insurance. And this is really an industry-wide challenge that has been placed on Schedule 2 employers. And so that is why we have reviewed this and are making this recommendation at this time, because it's not in our best interest to assume that risk moving forward, essentially.
Okay. All right. Any questions, discussion? Councillor McCann?
So I read the report. So then is it my understanding that if we go back to Category 1 and as an employer, it's going to cost us more, but we're going to save a little bit in the extra premiums that being at a level 2 would cost us? That's my first question.
Mr. Mayor, perhaps I'll answer that question. Councillor McCann, you're correct. There are some premium savings from our third-party insurer, but overall it's a net cost increase to the municipality. For the balance of 2021, it's around $150,000. That amount has been included in the draft budget that you have before you this evening. A full year, 2022, the cost would be approximately $200,000.
So then in terms of litigation and the possibility of, so there's a certain number of illnesses that, or cancers that somebody can contract and if proven as a result of their work that they do come back to their employer for some
Right.
sort of,
Just to clarify, it doesn't have to be proven, and that's the concerning piece. It's presumptive. If an employee that is in this category has a cancer, it's as identified in the legislation, it's assumed they got it from work. Whether they did or not is not up for debate. It's assumed that, and so that increases the risk. And so the third party insurer has declined to cover us anymore, and we've been unable to find another carrier.
Okay, so I guess what I'm really asking then, with what we're going to do now, do we have coverage for anybody that comes back as a result of sustaining some sort of illness due to work? Like, is it just cancer, or could it be something else? Post-traumatic stress, perhaps?
I think I'll take this question. So at this point, the legislation really is talking about those specific cancers, and it would be from date of diagnosis. So that's the significant date that plays a part in where the coverage stands.
Okay. Right.
Councillor Horn?
From my understanding, we have no choice in this, that this is dictated by WSIB legislation, correct?
The choice we have is to self-insure or not, but the presumptive legislation, we have no choice in.
Anything further? No? Okay. Anyone opposed to the passing of this resolution? I see no one opposed, so it's carried. Next one is item 951, moved by Councillor Keith, second by Councillor Horn. Whereas the town of Parry Sound is within the district of North Bay Parry Sound District Health Unit, and whereas the health unit received its first allocation of vaccine more than a month and a half later than Southern Ontario and Ottawa health regions, and whereas vaccine allocation for the health unit has not increased over time to compensate for delay in provision of the first vaccine allocation, and whereas COVID-19 transmission rates in Northern Ontario, as evidenced by the effective reproduction numbers, RT, are among the highest in the province, and whereas due to the vaccine allocation, the health unit is still in phase 1 of the rollout, while public health unit regions in Southern Ontario and Ottawa are in phase 2, and whereas 26.5% of the population in Parry Sound District and 22.4% of the population in Nipissing District are 65 years or older, compared to 16.7% for all of Ontario 2016 census. And whereas the delay in the health unit vaccine allocation and smaller vaccine quantities are causing increasing inequities in the booking of COVID-19 vaccination clinics. And whereas none of the local pharmacies have been included in the vaccine rollout in the North Bay Parry Sound District Health Unit, thereby limiting access to parts of the population that can travel large distances to our very few mass vaccination clinics. And whereas due to the vaccine allocation, our frontline medical personnel and first responders and Indigenous populations have not received their required allocation. Therefore, be resolved that the Council of the Corporation, the Town of Parry Sound, requests that the vaccine allocation be prioritized to the public health unit regions that are still in phase 1 to enable them to catch up to those regions in Southern Ontario. And furthermore, be it resolved that this motion be forwarded to the Honorable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, the Honorable Christine Elliott, Minister of Health, the Honorable Steve Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Sylvia Jones, Solicitor General, Dr. David Williams, Chief Medical Officer of Health, Vic Fideli, MPP, Nipissing, Norm Miller, MPP, Parry Sound, Muskoka, John Van Thoff, MPP, Timiskaming Cochrane, Mayors Reeves within the North Bay Parry Sound District Health Unit, Ontario Boards of Health, and the Association of Local Public Health Agencies, which is acronym is ALPHA. So there has been one change to this, and that is that we do have one pharmacy now that is able to give the vaccine. Do you want to amend the resolution? Is there a suggestion for that? Councillor McCann?
Well, I would think maybe if it were possible to have more than one pharmacy included in that. I understand it's
Oh,
shoppers
no.
at this point.
Yeah, no, this resolution is basically saying at the time when this was originally written, there were no local pharmacies. So where we could change it to whereas one local pharmacy has been included.
I think to be thorough, I think to be thorough, I would suggest that we do.
Yeah, I think we need to make that amendment.
Your worship, would you like to include whereas only one local pharmacy has been included?
Yes, that would be good. Okay, so moved by Councillor McCann and second by Councillor Keith. Any discussion on the amendment? No? Anyone opposed to the passing of the amendment? No. Okay. Okay, any discussion on the resolution as amended? Councillor McCann.
So I guess maybe just back to my reference to an additional pharmacies in the area. I see that some of the bigger centers have 2 or maybe even 3 pharmacies that are able to roll this out. Is part of what we're asking for, is it possible to ask for that, or is this sort of implied in terms of what we're asking here?
I think it's implied.
Okay, good enough. Yeah.
Any further discussion? No? Anyone opposed to the passing of the resolution as amended? No, that's carried. Thank you. And you got that amendment, right, Ms. Johnson?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, next is 1011. It's a bylaw moved by Councillor Burden, seconded by Councillor Borneman. That bylaw number 2021-7116 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a renewal agreement with Honeywell Limited for the provision of HVAC services for the Charles W. Stockey Center be considered as read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? And that's carried. Moved by Councillor Borneman, seconded by Councillor Burden, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Any discussion? No. Anyone opposed to the passing of the bylaw? No, that's carried then. Gotta keep all these meetings straight tonight here. Moved by Councillor Keith and seconded by Councillor Horn, that bylaw number 2021-7117 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement with the Office of the Fire Marshal for the transfer of funds required for the fire safety grant be considered as read a first time. All in favor? And that's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? That's carried. Moved by Councillor Keith and seconded by Councillor Horn that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Any discussion? Okay, anyone opposed to the passing of this bylaw? No, that's carried then. Okay, that I believe ends this special meeting. And so we will be moving to the next open session at 7 o'clock. So we can, I guess Forrest will demute, so there'll be a break in this format and we'll be back with the public in about 15 minutes.
It's awfully quiet. Are we connected?
Forrest, are we about ready?
Yep, you're live and it is recording. So I will admit the three guests who are in the waiting room now.
Okay, all right. Welcome back, everyone. As a reminder, this meeting is live streamed, recorded, and available on the internet by visiting the Town of Parry Sound's website at www.parrysound.ca. And we're into our next item of the agenda. Prior to the open session, council met at 6:10 for a brief closed session. It was moved by Councillor McCann, seconded by Councillor Borneman, that pursuant to section 239(2) and 3 of the Municipal Act SO 2001 C25 as amended, Council of the Corporation of the Town of Parry Sound moved to a meeting closed to the public in order to address a matter pertaining to B, personnel matter about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, a taxi license appeal. And that meeting was held. Is there any prioritization of the agenda? No? Okay. May I have a mover and seconder for the agenda? Councillor Keith and Councillor McCann, that the council agenda for April 6, 2001 be approved as circulated. Any discussion or comments on the agenda? No. Anyone opposed to the passing of the agenda? That's carried. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest? No? Okay. So council will hold 2 public meetings to consider proposed zoning bylaw amendments under section 34 of the Planning Act as per the following. 2.1. And just want to make sure I got this going right. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to now take a few minutes to hold an electronic public meeting to hear any interested persons with regard to 2 proposed zoning bylaw amendments under section 34 of the Planning Act. May I have a mover and seconder to adjourn the regular meeting? Councillor McCann, Councillor Horn. That we do now adjourn the regular meeting and declare the public meeting open. All in favor? That's carried. Ms. Johnson, can you explain how the public was notified of the first zoning bylaw amendment, Z/2102 George Street, John Jackson Planner Incorporated, on behalf of Ravi Prasher?
Yes, Your Worship. Notice was given by prepaid first-class mail to the required prescribed agencies and property owners within 120 meters. It was posted on the property, posted in the newspaper, and was placed on the town's website.
Thank you. Mr. Algie, can you explain the purpose of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment?
The purpose of the amendment is to change the property from a residential medium density R2 to a residential high density R3. The applicant has requested to create a 36-unit apartment building. The lands are vacant and do not have a municipal address yet. They are described as lots 11 and 12 on Plan 21, or parts 1, 2, and 3 of 42R 8176 and part 1 of 42R 9872.
Thank you. As this is an electronic public meeting under the Planning Act due to COVID-19, we can call upon those in electronic attendance if they wish to comment. So please make sure you have your screen on and that you signal the camera or raise your hand if you wish to speak. Our moderator will call out individuals, which is me, when it's their turn to speak, and please keep your microphone muted until it's your turn to speak. So, does anyone wish to speak in favor of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? Mr. Jackson. You're muted. There we go.
I think I'm unmuted. Thank you, Your
Okay.
Worship.
Yeah.
I'm the agent for the applicant. This is an application to rezone the lands that were described by Rebecca and Taylor on George Street for a 36-unit apartment building. The application was filed with a number of supporting components. We pre-consulted with staff and the proponents. We prepared a planning justification report. There's been an environmental report, a traffic impact report, a noise impact study, and preliminary engineering reports. We believe that the proposal is in conformity with the policies of the official plan. The project will add badly needed housing units to the town. New housing is supported universally, particularly in the provincial policy statements. It also is a support item in the growth plan for Northern Ontario, where new housing stock is also recommended. The proposal, I think, will respond to what we all have come to know as almost a housing crisis, not just in town, but throughout the province and country. I know that there's been a lot of interest. I have looked at the submissions made by neighbors, and I believe many of their concerns are going to be addressed, at least in part, during the more detailed site plan process. I had provided to the Zoom host a little sketch that shows the respondents to this application. If it's Taylor or someone can put that forward. What we've outlined on this particular image is the aerial photography showing approximately where this property is located to Forest and George Streets. And we think that with the appropriate buffering, the kinds of screening and siting, that we can address a lot of the concerns of the immediate neighbors that are affected. The common issue for us old timers in Parry Sound know that the sight lines leaving George Street onto Forest are not good. In fact, someone might describe them as quite treacherous, but we've believed that these are addressed in the engineering report, and there are a couple of measures in there that we think will mitigate against that. I'm not sure if it's of interest, but I did put a sketch forward, Your Worship, that located the submissions that were made. I'm not sure if Taylor can share that screen with us as well, which I think he's trying to do at this moment. And again, I've looked at those submissions, and I do believe that most will have either been addressed or can be addressed through mitigative measures through the detailed analysis. So failing to get that up on the screen, he'll probably be able to include that in his, well, maybe it's on its way. Oh, there we are. It's a little small scale, Your Worship, but again, it plots on the location of the proposed apartment building. And there were 5 submissions. Those submissions also included a petition, and the names that have an asterisk beside them are ones that signed the petition, didn't make a letter submission, but did sign the petition. So I showed those as well. So the 4 submissions were from those that aren't asterisk, such as Mr. Connigan, Mr. Bisson, Mr. Goulet across the road and down the hill on Forest Street. And oddly enough, we got a submission for Mr. Webb, who's kind of almost off the page. But in any event, I'm still of the view that these are more concerns that are anticipating unknowns in terms of change, but I'm not surprised. But I think, again, we can plan for them and deal with them as part of the process goes along. So I'm hoping to get council's support for what I consider to be a small step towards solving our housing crisis. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak in favor of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? And if so, please identify yourself by name or give your address. Nope. Okay. Does anyone wish to speak in opposition to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? And if so, please identify yourself by name and give your address. I do see another person on here. Do they?
Hello.
There we go.
Hello. It's actually Sarah Prio from 53 Forest Street.
Okay.
My computer was not working. I come back over to my neighbor's. She's currently with construction workers in her house. So I come over to talk first. We're very concerned with this development in our backyard. It borders our fence line. We're concerned. I own the easement where the proposed water and sewer are to come up. Very concerned of blasting directly beside my foundation. Or is there work in the works of putting the water and sewer up George Street? And if so, who's funding this? Is our taxes going to take a hit from this? What other concerns? I feel the liability is huge with the location beside the tracks and the trestle. We've had numerous fires in the summer with sparks. I'm not sure a high density population back there would be safe. George Street is very narrow, very treacherous, turning right onto Forest. I've been almost hit multiple times. I feel the Blind Hill is not safe to have families up there in a high density. I think the density rate that it's already zoned as is safe, not high density. I would like to further discuss this with someone in the next few days, few weeks before this is passed. I feel things haven't been looked at safely. The OPP are up there constantly with that back trail. I'm not sure everything's been looked at. I know there was a traffic thing done in February. I'm not sure. I think a traffic should be done. A traffic study should be done maybe in July when our population is giant. There's just a whole lot of concerns. I did write an email and sent it to Rebecca. So I would like some feedback from those questions. Yeah, so France is here now, and I'm going to switch it over to her to talk for her concerns. Okay.
No, there's no face or nothing?
No, Jamie's there.
Hi, Jamie, it's France.
Hi, France.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. Sorry, I've got some construction stuff going on at my house. So construction guys had questions. So I apologize for anyways, just getting here now. So yeah, concerns are, one thing is the environment, like, is this, environmentally feasible for this unit to go up, in a nice, wooded area that we don't have much left of in Parry Sound. And I'm opposed, obviously, to the building going up. I'm also concerned about the traffic study that I understand was done in 2013, can you clarify that for me, or
This is just a meeting tonight to hear
what my
those
concerns are?
favor and that sort of thing.
Okay,
You can ask your questions
Yeah.
and they'll get answered later.
okay. Okay, so that was one concern, is when the traffic study was done. The other concern is if the town is contributing money towards this project, as in water, sewer, like does the town say to the developer, well, you develop it and we'll help out with some of the, the structures that need to be done to get this building erected or whatever. So I'm just, wondering about if the town helps out a developer in that aspect. To bring people to have housing in Parry Sound, which I know is needed. I understand that. But I'm just also concerned about the population in my backyard with, amounts of people. I don't know if a fence will be put up, if the parking happens to be close to my home and they're driving into the parking lot and the lights, at nighttime. And will the developer receive grant money from any municipal government or provincial government for this project? As a, will they, get 20% of what the rental will be if they build this building, so that they can house, housing is needed in Parry Sound. Again, I understand that, but is that going to be an incentive for the builder if they get money from the government, like I say, municipal or provincial? Also, there's money available. Is there money available from the town if we wanted to consult with a lawyer? But again, that's a question. So I'm asking a question and I can have that answered at a later date. If there's money available when, residents have concerns, if we need to speak to a lawyer regarding our concerns. Like I know that there's a firm in Sault Ste. Marie that specializes in municipal issues, and just wanted to know if there was money available from the town for those for residents to speak to somebody in a law firm about our concerns. The other one is the foundation of our homes. If there is blasting, which there's a lot of rock back there, what happens to our foundation if they are damaged? And during the winter, I would imagine that Forest Street would become very busy as a way to get in and out of this complex, as opposed to, or Great North Road, as opposed to George Street, because that hill in the winter can become very slippery if you're going down the hill. So I just, have issues with that corner because I'm telling you now, Jamie, it's not if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. When people drive crazy speeds up and down Forest Street, it's since they put up the new road I moved here in 2014. I think it was 2015 when they redid Forest, and they did a great job. But this road here is a no word of a lie, is like the 400, for 4 to 5 months out of the year. And my concerns in the winter would be that this corner of Forest Street and George Street, people coming up that hill, if you're not careful and looking left, if you're turning right or left, it is a big issue. And with a population of more people coming in with an apartment building, I feel that it's not, like I say, it's not if somebody's going to get hit, it's when, because it is a very dangerous corner. So that's, that's my concern as well. And I'm just wondering if this does happen, will they provide us with a fence so that we can have, we are in privacy. We love our backyards right now because we have the privacy. And that's one of the reasons why I bought this home. And I understand things change. I get that. But I'm just wondering, for the homeowners who are affected, will we have a fence put in if this does go through? Other concerns are population, like I said before. I understand that, and again, I'm not being prejudiced whatsoever. I don't care if it happens, it's out of my control. But sometimes you get families and they're, at different ethnic groups, their way of living is a little bit different than ours, and they have more than one family living in complexes because they're coming from the city, and then they have visitors. And again, it's not being prejudiced, but I'm just going by their culture, and I totally respect their cultures. But I'm just saying that you often hear of multiple families living together, and then you have visitors. So the next thing you know is I have a small town in the middle in my backyard. And again, I respect them. There are hard workers, but we are all aware that we have an abundance of people coming from the city that are coming into our town. And again, like I say, I've got nothing against them. They're hard workers, but that is one of my concerns is what is the population going to be in my backyard? Yeah. And I'm not saying if you guys lived on 4th Street, would you be fighting for this? I'm sure you would be. How would other residents of Parry sound like an apartment complex in their backyard? I'm sure there wouldn't be too many. So, I'm fighting for what I can, for the house that I bought, for the privacy that, living in this beautiful town. You don't get to have what I have living here with just bush in my backyard. Yeah. So I these are my points, and if I can get answers to some of my questions at a later date, yeah, that would be great. And that's it for me.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jamie.
Yeah, I'm sure that Mr. LG or Ms. Johnson have been taking notes on what you've been saying. So
Okay.
that will be included or done later, and a lot of this will be addressed in a site plan process or whatever as well. So once we see that, which we haven't yet. So anyway, thank you very much. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak in opposition to the proposed development? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else. So, Mr. LG, have there been any letters received as a result of this notice?
Yes, there has been. I'll summarize them. So when I write the public meeting report, or sorry, the recommendation report, I'll attach all the original copies. We had a letter from Ken Webb. He's on George Street. He's okay with medium density, but the height is overkill overall. And it could degrade the intrinsic value of Tower Hill and the museum. A 36-unit building does not celebrate the upcoming anniversary of Tower Hill well, and has safety concerns with the entrance on 4th Street. David Juff submitted comments and concerns about drainage and trespass problems with the roadway in the area. He wants the roadway and offsite stormwater to be considered as part of any approval. His concerns upon the entrance of 4th Street and George Street, and feels a 3-way stop may be advisable, but overall he does not want the rezoning to R3. Ray and Roxanne Drew had questions on the number of stories, which is 3, and if it was subsidized housing. Concerns about the intersection of George Street and Forest and Parrytown Road. Questions about the impact on wildlife, stormwater, and traffic. and whether it results in wear and tear upon other roads such as Parry Sound Road, which are in rough shape. Chris and Angela Clark flagged concerns with the intersection as well. Safety is an issue today and would become a greater issue with this type of proposal. Raised issues with the quality of George Street and the lack of sidewalks, and feels the property is unsafe due to the proximity of train tracks and soil quality due to previous oil tank storage, and that this will negatively impact the museum and Tower Hill. James Bisson and Brenda Regan noted the location is too close to their backyard and will act as a large wall. They're concerned with the additional lighting in the parking lot and the number of vehicles going in and out and impeding upon their privacy. Traffic and intersection concerns. George Street's current condition is not desirable as there is no sidewalks and it's quite rough. And concerns were raised with noise, mess, disruptions that will affect privacy, agitation of pets, wildlife, and blasting. Dan Conahan also had concerns, major concerns due to COVID-19 impacts and how this will bring the risk of COVID-19 closer to his property. Concerns with portable toilets and imported workers may bring the possibility of COVID-19 to the immediate area as they're looking after elderly family. Traffic concerns due to the intersection. Will water capacity and sewer pressure be adequate? Impacts upon wildlife, noise, odor issues upon existing residences, and concerns of visitors trespassing on his property to park their cars. Has serious concerns with regards to the intersection and feels a three-way stop is necessary, and agrees with the reports provided by the applicant that George Street needs to be repaved and upgraded and widened, and wishes for this to be extended to the museum. That was from Reg Gossett, sorry. Lee Smith also had traffic intersection concerns. The property should be checked from environmental perspective due to the previous oil tank. Due to vegetation removal, stormwater could become an issue. Hopes all improvements will be at the cost of the developer, not the taxpayer. Dean Timpson and Margot Houston noted this will have a negative effect on the peace and quiet and enjoyment of all adjacent property owners. Adding 100 people on a half-hectare property is poor planning, as the land should actually be downzoned to permit less development. 4th Street was poorly designed and repaved years ago, and the intersection of George Street is dangerous. The adjacent rail line is a disaster waiting to happen. Found the applicant's application misleading as it shows different information on different spots. CP provided comments. I'm not going to go over them because it was a link to a 120-page technical document, so I'll save council summarizing that. We just received comments from Sarah Prue, and she spoke, so I'm not going to go over it in extensive detail, but they had concerns with regards to the easement, the foundation and blasting, who would pay for any improvements to the road, would the taxes foot the bill, the concerns about the timing and the year the traffic study was taken. George Street onto 4th Street is not ideal situation as it currently stands, and has a railway been contacted. Soil testing, the width of the road in winter isn't adequate. Drainage could become a problem, and the back bush is a core for wildlife. Major safety concerns with the rail line. There's been the forest fires, which was meant, or the small brush fires, I should say, which has been mentioned. High density just does not fit the criteria for this location. Agrees with housing, but this land wouldn't support it. Backfilling will ultimately flood out the neighboring properties, and questions whether council would want this in their backyard, as the OPP are constantly parked up there already. It's not a safe area. Needles have been found, and adding more in the mix would be troublesome. And there's also a 14 signature petition, which I'll attach to the council report. And that is all. Thank you.
Thank you. The public should contact staff to check the town's website, or check the town's website to see when this amendment will come back for decision. Council at its discretion may approve the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. If so, it must either circulate notice of passing of the bylaw or give notice in the local press. Objections to the passing of the bylaw will be received by the clerk within 20 days from the date such notice is given, which objections will be forwarded to the local planning appeal tribunal. If an appeal is submitted and the appellant has not provided counsel with an oral or written submission before the passing of the bylaw, the local planning appeal tribunal may choose to dismiss the appeal. And now for the second zoning bylaw amendment. Ms. Johnson, could you explain how the public was notified of the zoning bylaw amendment Z21-01, Louisa Street, John Jackson Planner Incorporated, on behalf of King, Shot and Hurd?
Yes, Your Worship, again, notice was given by prepaid first-class mail to the required prescribed agencies and property owners within 120 meters, posted on the property, and was placed on the town's website.
Okay. Mr. Elgie, can you explain the purpose of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment?
Certainly. The applicant has requested to amend the special provision 26.72 zone to a rural residential zone and recognize a reduced lot frontage of 34 meters for 2 provisionally created lots along Louisa Street. Rezoning was a condition of consent for a recent application, B37AB 2020. The property's addresses are 88 and 94 Louisa Street and are legally described as parts 5 through 7 and 9 through 11 of 42R 19371.
Okay, thank you. As this is an electronic public meeting under the Planning Act due to COVID-19, we'll call upon those in electronic attendance if they wish to comment. Please make sure that you have your screen on and that you signal the camera or raise your hand if you wish to speak. Our moderator will call out individuals when it's their turn to speak. Please keep your microphone muted until it's your turn to speak. So at this time, does anyone wish to speak in favor of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? If so, please identify yourself by name and give your address. Mr. Jackson.
Thank you again, Your Worship. Straightforward, as Mr. Elgie has described. I don't really have any comments. It's a perfunctory exercise as a condition of already having gone through a consent process. So it purely technical exercise. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak in favor of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? No? Okay. Does anyone wish to speak in opposition of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? Again, if so, identify yourself by name and your address. I'm not seeing anyone speaking against this. So, Mr. Elgie, have there been any letters received as a result of the notice?
No, there has not.
Thank you. The public should contact staff or check the town's website to see when this amendment will come back for a decision. Council at its discretion may approve the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. If so, it must either circulate notice of passing of the bylaw or give notice in the local press. Objections to the passing of the bylaw will be received by the clerk within 20 days from the date of such notice is given, which objections will be forwarded to the local planning appeal tribunal. If an appeal is submitted and the appellant has not provided counsel with an oral or written submission before the passing of the bylaw, the local planning appeal tribunal may choose to dismiss the appeal. Thank you, everyone. And may I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Borneman, Councillor Horn, that we do now declare the public meeting closed. Anyone opposed to that? Nope, that's carried then, and we're back to our regular agenda. Okay. May I have a mover and seconder for the minutes? Councillor Keith and Councillor Burden, that the minutes of the regular council meeting held March 16th, 2021 be approved as circulated. Any discussion on those minutes? Seeing none, anyone opposed to the passing of those minutes? No. Okay, that's carried. Questions of staff? Councillor Keith and then Councillor Borneman.
Yes, question is for Mr. Cairns. I have 2 questions. and one has to do with the street sweeping. Is there a plan as to how that is being done? Because it seems to be including the sidewalk. Can you expand on that, please?
Yes, certainly, through your worship. So this year, we obviously were able to get out a little bit earlier, which was kind of nice and much appreciated after the end of winter. So I guess you're asking in conjunction, typically the sidewalks, we'd like to get them done at the same time. Sometimes the sidewalk sweepers are not pickup sweepers, so they simply move the material out off of the sidewalk. And typically in areas where it's possible, it's swept into the street and picked up by the street sweeper itself. So the brooms on the sidewalk machines themselves don't actually pick the material up. They simply move the material along for pickup by other means. Does that answer your inquiry, Councillor Keith?
Yes, I think it gives me a better idea in reference to that, and with the debris and the sand, et cetera, that is picked up. Does that go back to the landfill site, or where does it go? I do have another question, though. Thank you.
Yeah, so the debris is transported back to our yard. For various reasons, it's not used elsewhere.
Okay. And my second question, I've had a number of people contact me asking me, they see the shovel, shall we say, but they see the equipment at the salt dock where it seems salt is being taken away, I assume, to lower the pile of salt that is there right now. What happens to that salt? Do you have any idea what is happening there at all?
Through your worship, I don't know if perhaps Chief Thompson or Mr. LG would prefer to answer that inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Kearns. Through you, Mayor McGarvey, to the councillor. At the present time, the agreement with the salt company says that they need to clear a certain area of the salt dock of salt for the summertime use of the owners, which is the town of Parry Sound, therefore our residents. They recognize that they are out of compliance at this time. It would be our understanding that they are trying to bring themselves into compliance through the use of the heavy equipment that is on site at this time, in terms of moving the salt onto the portion of the salt dock that is allowed for the storage of salt over the summertime. We have been in contact with the salt company, and they do not have anywhere to take the salt. There is nowhere in the province that can take the salt at this time. All salt storage sheds are filled that they generally deliver to, and the salt dock is not ever meant to be utilized in a fashion that would put salt back onto ships. The infrastructure is not in place to do that. So the salt company, SIFTO, is attempting to bring themselves into compliance in the manner which residents are seeing at this time.
So then, for clarification, we really don't know where the extra salt is going to be going at this point in time, or what's happening.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the extra salt, I'm not sure that there is extra salt. They did not deliver as much salt as was expected to be delivered over the winter time. I suspect the intent of the company is to store the salt over the summertime and sell it next winter to their regular purchasers.
So, excuse me, what I'm calling the extra salt is the salt that's being taken away, that will end up being taken away off of the salt dock. Is that correct? In order to level the pile, is that where we're going there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not being clear. I apologize. There is no intention of the salt company to remove any salt from the salt dock. It is being repositioned currently into a different pile to try to bring themselves into compliance with their agreement that says they can only have salt on approximately about a third of the salt dock in the summertime. No salt is currently being removed. It is just being moved around on site.
So from what I understand, Councillor Keith, they're going up. So they're creating a mountain. Okay, thanks, Chief Thompson. Councillor Borneman.
Well, I'd like to go back to Councillor Keith's comments about the street sweeper. I have had personal witnessing of that operation. I think they're doing a fine job, Mr. Cairns, but I would have some safety concerns as they're doing the road and traffic going in two ways. It's a hard vehicle to get around, and people don't wait very patiently, I'm finding, with the dust that it's stirring up. It's very difficult to see in both directions. So I guess from a staff's perspective, I'd be exercising all due caution. I don't expect you to answer to that. I think that's just a statement. Actually, Mr. Mayor, I think my question is probably for you to pass on to others. I've had a bunch of seniors in the community express concern and frustration in trying to book their COVID-19 vaccinations. Many wait on the phone for hours. Some get sent to communities other than our own. I'm just wondering if there's some way through the health unit to make this process a little easier and more straightforward for folks who probably aren't all computer geniuses. And I'll speak for myself in that respect. I don't want to belittle anyone else, but I'm just wondering if there's a way of clarifying and streamlining this process for people as we go forward.
Well, it's a good question, and I've had that question from a multitude of people personally, on the phone, and by emails. At this present time, I don't see one, but I will be talking to the chair of the board tomorrow night, because there are some things that do have to be worked out, and there are a number of people here that are extremely upset, frustrated, and feeling like they're second class. And I don't think that that should happen to anyone. So I'm going to be asking questions, a lot of questions, and hopefully we can get some answers and we can get a change in some of how this is rolling out, because there are people having to drive to North Bay, and by the time, if you're in your 70s, 80s, and you're having to drive to North Bay, and by the time you get up and back and do what you have to do, it's a 4-hour trip. That's kind of tiring on a person to try and do that. So, I think personally that things should be rolling out, I would hope, a lot better. But we will ask the questions and find out what can be done to make this better. My understanding is the clinics here are full this week, and like there was no wiggle room on them whatsoever. So can we get more clinics here? That's one of the questions, so that people don't have to travel so far. And can the process be made a lot easier as well? Yeah, I will do what we can to try and get answers.
Again, I understand you're the messenger, not the.
Yeah. But I'm not afraid to ask questions. So that's Councillor McCann.
Thank you. I'd love to ask Chief Thompson to take this opportunity to tell us how the firefighting training went. There's been a lot of coverage, and understand some congratulations and kudos are in order for it all coming together.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we had a fantastic opportunity to be able to utilize the Friendship Center. We're very grateful to the individuals who provided us that opportunity. The real life experience that the firefighters were able to take in over the 2 days was fantastic, in terms of a large building, being able to do real forcible entry, all sorts of other technical exercises they were able to do, and smoke up that building with fake smoke, and be able to have some real life experiences. So there were 4 departments that participated: Carling, McKellar, McDougall, and ourselves. And it was also an excellent opportunity to work together. Now, when we have any large scale fire calls, we are working with those partners extensively. And to be able to have the 20 to 30 firefighters who were there for the 2 days gain that experience and gain that exposure to each other and learn from each other was an exceptional experience. So there were a number of trainers who put in a great deal of time, primarily, leading the group was Oliver Maloney, and there were a number of others who put in a great deal of time to create the experience. So overall, just a fantastic experience.
So that leads to my next question, and indeed, thanks to them for that. I offered my services to Oliver as the next firefighter recruit, but apparently I'm not in shape here to handle the maneuvers. How is the recruiting coming along?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, our recruiting, we do need members here in town. Unfortunately, COVID-19 regulations are delaying us for the month of April, when we were planning on doing some recruiting. We were going to have a women's information night this month, as well as a general information night this month, to try to gain interest. Those 2 are both being delayed into May, so that we can have those meetings in a face-to-face situation, which we feel is going to be much more effective for drawing people in. So there is a little bit of delay. We are in need of people. Hopefully we'll be able to get those in May and get new people on board and started.
Great, thank you very much. Well done.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, correspondence, Ms. Johnson.
Yes, Your Worship, there are a number of items of correspondence, and all these items have previously been circulated to members of council and have been appended to the agenda and circulated. The first letter is from Steve Barnes. He's an applicant for Hillcrest Avenue lot severance. Mr. Barnes sent 2 letters of request for council to reverse its previously recommended denial of severance of his Hillcrest Avenue, William Street property. These letters from Mr. Barnes are as follow-up to his deputation to council on March 16th, and council's recommendation at that same meeting that the planning board deny the application. The planning board has not yet made a final decision on the matter, and instead passed a resolution that they defer to planning staff to examine further before returning to the Parry Sound Area Planning Board. The second item is from Chris McQuarrie, a Natural Resources Canada Canadian Forest Service. Mr. McQuarrie is doing a research project proposed for Kilbear Provincial Park to introduce 3 species of biological control agents against the emerald ash borer, which is destroying the ash trees. Mr. McQuarrie asks if the town has any comments on this proposal, and if so, to send them in by May 15th. This item has also been referred to the Director of Public Works for information and any recommendations or comments. The third item is from Minister of Finance Peter Bethlenfalvy regarding the funding of $5,000 to the town of Parry Sound under the Ontario Cannabis Legalization Implementation Fund. The next letters are a series regarding the situation of the no trespassing signs posted at the path that connects the main fitness trail to the lower trail along the shoreline known as Rabbit Canyon. The letters variously include concerns about the closure of the smaller path by the private landowner, concerns about the no trespassing sign itself, support for council's position not to permit a vehicular bridge over the main fitness trail to access this small privately held landlocked parcel, and hope for a positive resolution to the situation that would ultimately put the smaller trail in public ownership. So those are the various themes that have been put forward by all the writers of the letters from, and I'll just name them: Suzanne Borup-Powell, Stephen Hayter, Nancy Fraser, Carmen Quinnell. Those were all individual letters. And then there was a letter that was circulated in the same letter, signed by a number of people, including Linda Chase, Pat Clark, Don Brickett, Ray Brown, Rachel Brown, Pauline Brown, Renate Kozlowski, John and Donna McGill, Conrad Vandervalt, Janet Patterson, Jill Murphy, Tom Morrissey, David and Jody Bernati, Shelby Siegmiller, Brandon Siegmiller, Carmen Duncan, Julia Mader, Roberta Smart. So most of those letters were circulated to council. A few of them just came in after the agenda was, in fact, just came in today. So I've added all of those names of writers of the same letter. And that's all the correspondence.
Okay, thank you. Reports can be quick tonight, so we can get into the budget. I'll start with Councillor McCann. I'll just go by across the screen.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and fellow councillors, staff, and the public. Very brief report here with Councillor Borneman. I attended the Belvedere Heights Board of Management special regular meeting on March 24th. There's a lot of housekeeping. Our board chair administrators report, Life Lease Community Support Services. Ted Knight, our provincial rep, was reappointed. And then the next evening, Thursday, the 25th, I attended the West Parry Sound District Museum monthly meeting. And just, again, a lot of housekeeping. We have an HR committee, which is working towards a very simple code of conduct that will be presented at our next meeting. We have an asset management plan underway, and the usual business manager and treasurer's report presented. And then it was back to Belvedere on the 30th of March for a special meeting, and Councillor Borneman was with me at that one as well too. It was a special meeting about future planning and addressing future concerns for the growing demand of long-term care in our West District. And that's my report.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Horn.
Good evening. Thank you. On March 17th, I attended the Bobby Orr Hall of Fame committee meeting. It has been decided that for this year's induction, which was actually last year, will be held virtually on Friday, June 25th, 2021. We'll be following up with more information about that ceremony. Also, discussions about a youth event near the end of August, around the weekend of August 21st, COVID permitting in terms of gathering. So we'll see how that pans out. But the idea is to have a soccer baseball tournament for our youth in our area utilizing Kinsman Park. So stay tuned for that information. Again, that is COVID permitting. On March 22nd, I attended the Parry Sound Area Planning Board meeting. There was 2 zoning applications approved for the Township of McDougall, 1 for the Township of McKellar, 2 for the Township of Carling, and then there was 1 deferral for the Town of Parry Sound. That's it. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Borneman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, everyone. On the 18th, I attended a Zoom meeting wherein Minister Marilee Fullerton announced a number of expansions to long-term care beds in Ontario, including an additional 24 beds for Belvedere, which is not a great deal, but it is a step in the right direction. So hopefully we can continue to move that process forward. Councillor McCann reported on the other meetings that the board at Belvedere has conducted in the past couple of weeks. I did also have an operations meeting at the airport, and we're quickly ramping up for the season. hopefully. Flying was one of those things like golf last summer that took off. Right now, though, accessing the cafe and such is restricted, as all other restaurants and bars are. Finally, I want to congratulate the Young family who terminated their business at the Boston Cafe at the end of March after over 60 years of operation in Parry Sound. So I, it's always been a good service for many people in the area. I want to congratulate Reva, Robbie, and Cindy and their staff and wish them all the best in going forward. And that's my report.
Thank you. Councillor Burden.
I haven't had any meetings since the last council meeting, so I have nothing to report.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Backman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, everyone. I haven't had any meetings. However, I did field several calls regarding the salt pile. And that's my report for this evening.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Keith.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, fellow councillors, staff, and the public, Councillor Horn has already explained my attendance and my participation with the Parry Sound Area Planning Board. But I also want to say not only congratulations to the Young family, but in whatever their endeavors are in the future and how much they've contributed to our community over the years. But I thought the article that was written, I thought that was a wonderful article that was written by them. It not only said about the things that they appreciated in our community, but it really showed the town of Parry Sound welcoming and the community support and spirit over the years. So I think that really says a lot about our community. And I hope when anybody that read it, they would interpret it afterwards to be really proud to be in a community that was so welcoming and warm and so inviting. And I hope that we can only have more people come to our community that can see what a great place it is to live. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So council staff and public, March 17th at 9 a.m. I was downtown with our economic development officer and Shirlene Johnson to support an initiative that Shirlene worked on to support local business. March 17th at 10 a.m. I participated in a Hunters Bay radio program with Vince Kilchecki from Lakeland Power. We were being interviewed about the Speedier project here in Parry Sound, and which is the solar panel project on the former landfill site. March 17th was in the afternoon was an AMO Housing Task Force meeting with Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing staff on hand. March 18th was the beginning of the bi-weekly meetings with the district municipalities and our health unit. March 24th in the morning, I presented a certificate on behalf of council to Reva, Rob, and Cindy Young for their operation of the Boston Cafe. For 58 years, the Young family has run this business in Parry Sound, and we certainly wish them all the best in their retirement or whatever new venture they might decide to do. So that's quite a history there. March 24th at 7 p.m. I attended the Horticultural Society Zoom meeting. Good to see a strong membership despite COVID, and this organization does a great job in the gardens, maintaining the gardens around town for everyone to enjoy. And they're certainly hoping for this year that they can be more active than last year. March 25th at 10 a.m. I listened to an update from our local health unit on the COVID situation in our health unit area. Then at 1 p.m. was the bi-weekly meeting with the municipalities health unit. And then March 25th, I also had an AMO executive meeting. March 26th was the AMO board meeting. April 1st was an AMO MOU meeting with the provincial government. And April 1st, I also attended 2 public health information meetings. That's my report. So we have one item to ratify from closed. So it's 7.1. It's moved by Councillor Burden and seconded by Councillor Borneman. that the Council of the Town of Parry Sound approves application 001-2021's appeal and grants a temporary taxi driver license, and the council hereby directs the issuer of the licenses to issue the applicant a 6-month probationary taxi driver's license with the following conditions. A, that a level 2 criminal record check be provided at the end of the temporary period, 6 months, and an annual thereafter as part of the regular renewal process without any new convictions. And B, that subsequent driver's abstracts checked every 6 months while holding a valid taxi driver's license do not contain any new convictions. And C, that the owner of Parry Sound Taxi sign a responsibility agreement. And D, that if the town becomes aware of any violation of the applicant's probation conditions set herein, the license be revoked immediately. Any discussion? Anyone opposed to the passing of this resolution? No, that's carried. Moved by Councillor Horn, second by Councillor Keith, that the 2020 statement of remuneration paid to council and appointed board members attached to Schedule A be accepted. Discussion? No. Anyone opposed to the passing of this resolution? No, that's carried. Now, I've got moved by Councillor Backman and seconded by Councillor McCann that the 2021 operating budget as amended be approved and that the budget bylaw be submitted to the April 20th, 2021 council meeting for ratification. We will begin with Mr. Harris, who has some opening comments, and then we will move to Ms. Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a few comments I'd like to make before turning it over to Ms. Phillips, our Director of Finance, who will be providing some additional details for the benefit of council and the public. In March of 2020, just over a year ago, council had approved the budget and COVID hit. When it became apparent that COVID was a worldwide pandemic, our first priority was the health and safety of our employees and the public. And our second priority was to manage the financial impact of COVID, increased expenses, lower revenues, and uncertainty with respect to taxes receivable and cash flows. Through a variety of actions that council undertook in 2020, we managed through 2020 and expect to end 2020 with a positive financial position. So as we get into 2021, as you can appreciate, planning for what to expect in 2021 continues to be a challenge. The impact of COVID continues. In addition, we have significant increases in cost, primarily insurance. These various cost increases have been incorporated into the budget that is being presented to you this evening. To reduce the impact on the budget and limit the tax increase, it has taken more time to review departmental budgets and prepare the draft budget. So we certainly appreciate council's patience in waiting for the budget to be presented this evening. We would have liked to have had it earlier before council, but we had some significant challenges, and I think council will appreciate the increase that is in the budget, and it took that extra time to get it down. Although we're still dealing with uncertainties and effects of COVID, we have applied what we learned in 2020, and that was very helpful in putting together the 2021 budget. Expenses have been cut, significant expense cuts in the Stocky Center, for example, because revenues are way down. And we've received financial funding from the province that is specifically for COVID, and we've applied that where we can. There's always a chance you can be audited, and it's very specific as to what the funds can be used for. Other impacts, such as cost increases, have been incorporated, as I mentioned. This evening, we're able to present a budget with a modest increase in taxes for operations of 0.66%. And I think that's a position that we're comfortable in recommending to council. On top of that is the infrastructure surcharge of 1.8, but from an operations point of view, it's 0.66%. Since 2019, tax increases for operations have been below 1% and below the rate of inflation. I would like to take just a moment to thank the senior leadership team and their staff for making this budget possible. There's a lot of work to get it to this place, to get it to this point, particularly with the cost increases, the insurance moving to Schedule 1, and et cetera. I'd like to have a special thank you to Ms. Phillips for her insights, analysis, and efforts in bringing all this together. She did this shorthanded with the accounting manager position vacant for much of this time. So it's a team effort and led by Stephanie. I'd really like to thank everybody for their efforts. And unless there's any questions, I'd like to turn it over to Stephanie. She's got a presentation.
Thank you. Good evening. Okay, just bear with me while I get my presentation up and going. Okay, so first I want to remind Mayor and Council that they can raise their hand by going to reactions and holding your hand up in that way, and then I can see that under the participant list, and I'll try to watch for that as well.
Okay. Okay, so you'll be watching for that, right?
Yes, I'll do my best to watch for that.
All right.
Okay. Can every presentation?
It's getting there. There we go.
Okay, here we go. All right, so good evening, Council and the public. Welcome to the 2021 draft budget presentation. Okay. Tonight, I'll present the 2021 budget overview and the impact to the taxpayer. I'll show the historical tax rate increases, do a recap of the capital budget, and present the tax-supported budget funding, as well as by service area. I will identify COVID-19 pandemic fiscal challenges and list how COVID-19 funding has been budgeted for use. Then we'll work our way through the summary of net levy changes by division, and I'll explain variances, and staff will answer any questions of council. Then council will go through the items for consideration. So these items can be brought forward by a member of council or the public, and staff are seeking direction or confirmation for each of those items. So that's the last on the agenda there for tonight. So starting with the 2021 budget overview. So the town requires 316,000 roughly in additional funds in 2021. Service levels have been maintained, and this is a 2.46% rate increase net of growth. 1.8% is for infrastructure, and 0.66% is for operations. So key impacts on the budget include 100,000 in insurance premium increases. On this item, the Federation of Northern Municipalities and the Northwestern Ontario Municipal Association conducted a survey, and 65 municipalities polled. The average increase was just over 20%. So the town of Parry Sound isn't unlike those municipalities that participated in that survey. So this is an industry-wide issue at this time. In addition, 150,000 was an impact for WSIB premiums for the move from Schedule 2 to Schedule 1 employer. This is to secure adequate coverage for volunteer firefighters, as the town's indemnity insurance provider opted out of providing this kind of insurance coverage. And this is as a result of legislative changes regarding presumptive legislation for volunteer firefighters. So another impact of the budget is that we've had limited assessment growth. So for 2021, that's at only around 35,000. The town's assessment growth has typically been at least 3 times that amount. So there's been a delay in recognizing assessment growth as a result of the pandemic, where construction value has actually been similar to previous years or a little bit higher than in 2021 and 2020. So that's not what would have been expected. And then other impacts are COVID-19 pandemic. So dealing with the challenges of the pandemic and changes to expected revenues and other operating impacts within the budget. So the impact to the taxpayer. So the taxpayer will pay $34.08 per year, or $2.84 additional per month for every 100,000 in residential assessment. This is what a, oh, I see there's a question. So this is a 2.46% increase. That's what that impact is. Here, let's see. Okay. So Paul has a question. Mr. Borneman?
Yes, Stephanie. I just want to make sure I'm hearing this correctly and suggesting maybe that we advocate for some review of this. You're telling us that our insurance went up by $100,000 and that at the same time, our insurance company is no longer insuring volunteer fire departments. So to move to a different category of WSIB coverage, that's costing us an additional $150,000. That's correct?
Yes. So through you, Mr. Mayor, our indemnity insurance provider is a different provider than our municipal insurance provider where we pay the premiums to. So that change is directly related to WSIB legislative changes back in 2018, where now those indemnity providers are opting out of providing insurance related to volunteer firefighters. So we're just having a double impact from different angles regarding risk management.
So, Mr. Mayor, before we move on from this, I just want to suggest that maybe we ask the associations, AMO and Phenom and whoever else out there to have a look at this and go back to the province and say, hey, something isn't right here. It's kind of double dipping here. We're being punished twice for action that they took a couple of years ago. And so I think that needs to be addressed with them.
What I can tell you is that it has been talked about, and the province is dragging its feet on the indemnification piece, which they had said they were going to do something about. And it seems as though they're moving a lot slower than they did. This is happening right across the province. It's not just here. The insurance companies are just driving everything through the roof, and I'm sure people are seeing it on their personal insurance as well. I know I have on mine, and I don't know where this is going to end, but we can certainly have staff prepare a resolution for the next council meeting, and add our voice to the ongoing increases that the insurance companies are doing. And quite frankly, they seem to be getting away with it, which they shouldn't be. So
that's all I'm asking, Mr. Mayor, is that we address it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So on the next slide here, there's a bit of an example for you. So this example can be used to convert the impact of property taxes for your own property assessment. So in this example, for a property that's assessed at $186,000, which is the average, when divided by $100,000 and times by $34.08, you can get your own property tax impact. So for this property, it would be $63.39 per year, or $5.28 additional per month. So it just shows you how you may convert that for your own property assessment. Okay, this table shows the historical operating and capital rate increases have been less than inflationary levels. So this year, what's proposed is 0.66%. The 2021 draft capital budget includes 5 million in carry forward projects and 3.1 million in new projects. And the amount funded from taxation is 9.6% less than 2020. But more is planned to go towards a future infrastructure replacement. So $157,208 more is planned to go to that in accordance with a council policy, which puts this 1.8% towards infrastructure funding to help close the infrastructure gap. So that's a bit of a recap. So moving on, this is for the 2021 operating budget. This slide shows funding sources for the tax supportive budget. So 9,963,000 approximately in property taxation, and 70%, that's about 70% of the funding for the operating budget. And the other 30% is supported through provincial grants, user fees, investment earnings, and other revenues. So this chart shows the operating budget, like the net budget by service area. So what I'll point out here is 28% of your municipal taxation dollars go towards external boards, levies, and district services. So that's kind of a standout point here. And then transportation is the next largest service area at 19% of the net budget, followed by development and protective services at 10%. Okay, so COVID-19 pandemic fiscal challenges. So some of the main challenges in 2021 for the budget is loss of revenues at Parks and Recreation, Stocky Center, and Bobby Orr Hall of Fame. So 455,741 expected to be lost at the Stocky Center. That's the largest. Departments carefully reviewed discretionary expenses, so training, conferences, travel, and meals. 42,000 was cut from that area altogether for the town, and this is mainly due to the way training is being conducted and the change in in-person meetings to be changed to virtual. So that's been accounted for in everyone's budget. So that's an area where we paid particular attention. Part-time summer student complement, vacant positions. So the reduction there is 167,828. The majority of this is part-time summer positions for a change of operations at the Stocky Center. The other impacted positions are cemetery student and records management casual or summer positions. So these areas will focus on completing the tasks using internal resources that we already have. By optimizing those internal resources. And other reductions are artists, guarantees, fees, meals, and rental settlements at the Stocky Center, 142,000. Other materials and contracted services at the Stocky Center due to change in operations as well, 168,000 approximately. So those are areas where costs have been reduced within the budget. Now, funding applied to operations, COVID-19 funding. So 9,950 has been applied to the Stocky Center for financial pressures and other pandemic supplies. Other than this, though, any reductions in revenues have been completely offset by reductions in expenses and changes in operations to accommodate those in that area. 59,840. The Bobby Orr Community Center, so that's expected lost revenues there. So the COVID-19 funding for expected cost pressures can be applied towards that. And 9,000 for Parks and Recreation lost programming revenue. So areas where revenues are lost are rental fees, programming, events, and anything impacted by reduction to in-person events and things like that. So 29,168. So the town is able to apply COVID funding towards bylaw enforcement related to the pandemic. And $43,080 is how much is budgeted towards pandemic supplies and expenses. So using 2020 as historical data on how much was spent in those areas, this is what's expected to be spent in 2021 towards the pandemic. So after these have been applied, 133,000 still remains of the funding. And that is to be kept in reserve to be used towards the pandemic only for this year or into 2022 if required. And any unexpected things that come up as a result of the pandemic, council would still have that flexibility to apply that funding, what remains there. Okay, so into the summary of changes to net levy by division. So. Okay, so mayor and council. So I'll just go through here and kind of explain the dollar change, the variances in the different division areas. So for mayor and council, there was a $5,000 grant typically requested by the Chamber of Commerce, wasn't requested for 2021. And conferences, conventions, and meetings has also gone down. So that's contributing towards part of the change. In this area, the town contributes $5,000 each year towards the election reserve to go towards funding that. So those are the main variances in that area. Under the office of the CAO. Okay. So this area was impacted by a reduction to the town's share of the Provincial Offences Act fines of $22,000. Investment earnings are also expected to go down by approximately $65,000, and this is directly as a result of the pandemic and reduced interest earned on investments. Records management, casual, and student, which I mentioned earlier, that's been taken out of the budget for 2021. And the reserve contribution, typically we contribute about $108,000 towards repayment of an LED project, but this ended, so 2020 was the last year for that. And in 2021, the town will contribute towards Dock C, Big Sun Marina project to repay that to themselves out of Capital Asset Legacy Reserve. Okay, into economic development. Nothing really substantial there, just in changes. There's a contribution to the West Parry Sound Economic Development Collaborative and to CBDC, which is typical. And the West Parry Sound Regional Economic Development Officer, the cost for that individual has been added here, and then also the recovery of the expenses from the collaborative is also incorporated as well. So moving forward to development and protection services. So under emergency and protective services, this is where the pandemic expenses can be found. And there's an in and out for that, where the contribution from the COVID-19 funding is also recognized in that area. Under fire services, the increase related to WSI premiums expected is about 10,668 under this section. Increased training totaling 15,000 is also recognized under salaries and wages there. And an increased insurance cost is evident in this division, which is around 12,193 under this department. Bylaw enforcement. So the COVID-19 funding of 29,168 was recognized to go towards enforcement in this area. Also, other revenues typically earned, like for parking in different areas, have been down as a result of enforcement efforts being focused on the pandemic. So the funding is also intended to go towards a loss in revenues in that area, and staff will be developing a strategy there. Building fees are expected to be up about $35,000 compared to 2020. The increase is based on anticipated building projects in 2021. And salaries and benefits, there's a 9,868 in this department related to a summer student to assist in building and planning. And this is, town has also applied for grant funding for that. So that's contingent upon receiving that funding as well. Under planning, there's a contribution from reserve for the development charges study, and the study costs are also located here as well. And there is a transfer to reserve for the facade improvement program of 40,000, which is similar to 2020 as well. So that's planned in the budget. And then as council allocates that funding, it would be recommended to be transferred out of reserve, which is typically how we handle that item in the past. So under development, there's an increased cost for insurance related to the Big Sound Marina. This Wharfingers insurance is required and purchased for 2021, but it's an additional insurance that the town didn't have prior to 2021. And the contribution to reserve here in this area of 103,200 is the repayment of the temporary borrowing from the town's capital asset legacy reserve towards the funding of Dock C that I mentioned a bit earlier. Okay, so into public works and recreation. So for transportation, we can see an insurance premium cost increase of 15,743. Gravel surface maintenance cost is expected to go down about $8,000. There is, in 2020, a bridge needs study was needed, but that's not needed again for 2021, so that's been removed from this area. And there's increased costs due to the change from Schedule 2 to Schedule 1 employer previously mentioned. That's about 14,000 in this area. And contracted services costs have decreased in transportation operations by 60,500. And then this is due to increased internal process efficiencies. So the town is trying to do more with internal resources to optimize and reduce contracted services costs in that area. Winter control costs, those costs overall are expected to be 21,000 less than at the 2020 budget. So some reductions there in that area. Decreased contracted services costs, less being outsourced for snow removal as a result of optimizing internal resources. So Stormwater control. Costs are up a bit in this department area, mainly due to internal equipment allocation. So more time has been spent on stormwater. So there was a reallocation of costs that more closely represent what's actually happening. So the costs would have came out of transportation and gone to stormwater, which is where staff are completing a lot of or a more extra equipment hours in that area. Okay, into waste management. Equipment rental costs is expected to be down by about 7,000. So less is required for equipment rentals based on historical costs with bin ownership and compaction. Repairs and maintenance costs are down about 5,000, and this is due to the same reasons. Okay, into information technology. So an internal recovery allocation was adjusted to more accurately reflect the actual direct costs of IT support. So this internal allocation out to other departments increased by approximately 30,000. And that is just to be more reflective of actual costs. Oh, there's a bit of a question. Councillor Keith.
Oh, thank you. Did we miss cemeteries or was it just me?
Oh, maybe I did. Oh. The order is just not quite identical. Okay, so I will come to cemetery just after this. I'll just finish up IT and then I'll come back to that section. Thank you. Okay, so for IT, there's a contribution budgeted towards the GIS strategy of 10,500. This is to go towards the third-party study that the town's applied for through Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. So this would be contingent upon receiving that grant funding. The IT reserve contribution is planned to be up about 5,000. This is to account for increased surveillance, increased demands for surveillance. So that increased funding there is for that. Additional firewall improvements are planned for 2021. The cost of this is 12,000. And with rising threats of cybersecurity, the town's consistently managing and protecting data to provide additional layers of security. Okay, so cemeteries, sorry about that. The notable variance there is a reduction due to the elimination of summer students. So salaries and benefits are down by approximately 13,000 in that area. The municipal office costs are generally in line with 2020. The small variance is just difference in salaries and benefits and yeah. Yes, so the impact is about 2% of a number of small variances, which are notable in that area. The BOCC. So you can see that licenses and lease revenues and user fee revenues are down. This is as a result of COVID-19. So 59,840 is planned to be funded from the COVID-19 funding to help with that pressure. The utilities at the BOCC, have been increased by 11,000 to be more reflective of historical actuals on review. Elevator servicing costs are down about $8,000, so that's been updated based on historical actuals as well. And salaries and benefits have been impacted due to WSIB premium changes and a small amount for estimates for increases without a collective agreement in place. Councillor Keith, do you have a question, or is your hand just still up?
I'm a bad girl, I guess.
Okay. So Parks and Recreation. So there was a small reduction in revenues expected at approximately $9,000, and $9,000 is planned to be funded in that area from COVID-19 funding. Insurance premiums are up about $3,634 in that area. 20,000 was removed for the tree replacement program, but the amount was budgeted within the capital budget for 2021, so it's just a reallocation of the costs. Salaries and benefits are impacted again by WSIB premiums. There's a Life Saving Society facility audit planned for 2021. This is $5,500. And the audit is for the best interests of the town. So for risk management and legal liability considerations, the town's plan to have that audit in 2021. Okay, so finance. So grant funding from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities for 50,000 is budgeted, and this is for phase 2 of the asset management plan, action plan. So the town applied for funding for phase 2. A contribution from infrastructure replacement reserve for 75,800 covers the remainder of phase 2 and phase 3 of the development of the town's asset management plan. So the action plan that would cover the development of the risk strategies and levels of service and all the steps to get us up to the actual preparation of the asset management plan, as well as finalization of the plan for the town, of all the town's assets. So the total completion cost of the plan is $125,800 to the end, and 50,000 of that is funded through the grant. Insurance costs for 2021, 20,752 is the increase for premiums. The town's share of tax write-offs has decreased in 2021 by 110,000. So less taxation write-offs are expected for 2021 with no substantial outstanding appeals. So the town's not aware of any appeals at this time. Okay, into external levies, boards, district services. So the health unit levy remains the same as 2020. It shows a bit less here. That's due to, we were anticipating that the cost would go up. So in 2020, the town contributed a little bit to a reserve for the health unit, but it's not required in 2021. So we'll just hold that. The council will have that in the event that they need it in the future. So the town's portion of land ambulance has gone up a little bit, 3.55%. The Belvedere Home for the Aged levy has decreased from 2020 to 2021 for the town's portion by 14,751. And the library has requested a levy increase of $6,150, which is one of the items for council consideration for tonight. And the museum increase of $1,674 is also part of one of those items as well. The most notable impact here is the OPP levy increase. So the net budget impact here is $66,305. But the town hasn't been advised of whether the port security and prisoner transportation grant will continue for 2021. The grant is for $105,000. So in the budget right now, contribution from the police cost stabilization reserve is budgeted for $105,000 to cover that in the event that we don't receive that grant funding. And in recent years, and typically the town contributes from the reserve any change in the net levy. If we receive more for a grant or more is required, the town funds the changes from that cost stabilization reserve. So yeah, so that's pretty much all of these external levies boards. Stocky town contribution there is unchanged from 2020 to 2021. This is a result of a lot of review and operating changes within the budget to accommodate COVID-19 impacts in 2021 expected. Overall, the tax levy for 2021 is $9,963,114, which is $111,253. This translates to a 0.66% increase for operating net of growth. So these are the items for council consideration for tonight. This is on page 43 of your budget book if you're looking through there. So item 1 is the increase contribution to the public library. So at this time, if we'll go through each item and then I'll turn it over to Mayor McGarvey to lead the discussion on items and make a determination or a direction from council on each of these. So the increase requested for the public library is $6,150. So this increase has already been incorporated into the operating budget, but council as a formality will approve the request if they wish or discuss otherwise.
Okay, any comment on that? Should we vote on each item or just go through it? Councillor Bachman.
Can you clarify the contribution to the museum on Tower Hill? What is that cost for? Is that for the actual museum contribution?
Yes, so it is through you, Mr. Mayor. It's a request for, we contribute an annual contribution to the museum, and the request this year is increased by $1,674.
Just as a follow-up, it's my understanding that the museum has been closed for a year. Mm-hmm. What exactly, why are they requesting an increase? Has there, I mean, that I just don't quite clearly understand that.
I can answer that.
Councillor McCann?
Councillor McCann, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know which one I should be clicking on here. Yeah, in answer to Councillor Beckman's question, we've been closed, but there's been a lot of work that's been that we've been doing. There's been a lot of housekeeping as far as, let me start over. There's been a lot of work that we've been doing in the Roy Hall building or area, the area in which we're going to be opening up at some point after COVID is done, the railway model section. We had the damage this year from water pipes, and we've had some damage to the building itself from squirrels and raccoons that had to be repaired. We've been basically busy with staff looking after the artifacts and managing them, digitizing them, social media. So in the event that we were closed, our staff there were still, albeit a skeleton staff, we're still fairly busy. And we're holding our ground right now, but we're going to, within the years to come, need to address at best a $20,000 deficit in our budget. And so the money's desperately needed.
Okay.
Sorry, I've gone up. There we go. Councillor Keith?
Yes, I think the mayor a moment ago asked if we would want to vote on each one of these items separately. My feeling is that we should be voting on these separately, so we have clarification, please.
Yeah, that would be good. I can't see everybody right now, so
So do you want, Mr. Mayor, would you like me to go out of the presentation for a minute at each time? Or I can maybe try to do that.
Well, does everybody have their binders or pull it up on the screen?
I have mine.
Okay, so if you turn to page 43. That's the page that is up on the screen right now. So if everybody has that page, then we can go off the share screen so I can see who's there. Perfect. Okay, we're all set. Okay, so we have the number one, the increased contribution to the public library. And is there any further comments around that? Councillor McCann.
Well, just I would say that, as you know, we're trying to maintain a very old building, and it seems to always need more than a little bit of LTC. So we're doing our best and certainly working hard at it. But I think that the request is certainly warranted. The staff is working very hard, and they've been turning heads in the library business across Northern Ontario for the stuff that they've been doing, particularly maneuvering around COVID. So, everyone has the same issues. We're trying to forge ahead with aging infrastructure and buildings and such, and trying to make what we have work. I don't know, maybe Vanessa would like to add to that.
She just had her hand up, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I'd just like to add that throughout COVID, at all times when by legislation the public library has been open and has been going above and beyond to provide this resource to the community, as we know that we are legislated to provide services in our community. And I've previously stated in many deputations and budget comments in regards to the infrastructure maintenance that Mr. McCann does speak of. And again, we have only 8,000 in our reserves. And with the attempts, we have gone out to apply for funding, but there is no guaranteed at this time And again, one of the great things about our Parry Sound Public Library is that the staff has really been recognized throughout Ontario as a lead in their efforts to manage the COVID and maintain the COVID service. The public library service. And so there's been, again, I'd just like to congratulate the staff, and there's no doubt that this contribution will be of great value to Parry Sound residents.
Anything further on the allocation to the public library? Okay. Anyone opposed to the allocation to the public library? Nope. Okay, that's carried then. Increased contribution to the museum on Tower Hill. Any more comments? Councillor Backman?
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess my question would be for Mr. McCann.
I'm not hearing her.
She's kind of in the slow-mo frozen. Not sure what the question is.
Could she send an email to you, Mr. Mayor?
Sure. Meanwhile, while that's happening, maybe Councillor Keith can ask her question.
Yes, I was just going to suggest two things. One is that I think culture is very important. And just as we recognize this for the library, I think recognizing it for the museum is very important too. So I would just round that figure to 2,000 rather than us nickel and diming it to 1,674. I'm wondering if anybody would support me in that amendment for that amount.
I think you probably have support, but I'd like to know from Ms. Phillips what the impact is. Does that change anything?
Well, a small change would change the operating levy increase by, so if that's just $400. That's approximately 0.3%.
0.3.
Yeah, so it would change it from
266. Okay.
Yeah, from 0.66 to 0.69 or 0.6. It's very small. It's less than 0.01.
Yeah. Okay. So I wanted to know that first. Is council still in favor of that? I'd ask for a mover and seconder then on something like that if they're asking to move it up. Councillor Keith, Councillor McCann, any discussion on increasing that, rounding that off to 2,000? Councillor McCann.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to just make mention, and I did so in my report earlier, that at our last meeting, we talked about the fact that we are working towards a simple code of conduct. A bit of negativity in the news lately. We have a great board of people, and throughout the years, the museum has been very fortunate to have just that. We don't have something written down, but I can assure you that each member is very respectful of each other and polite and very much dedicated to what we're doing. And so I just want to let our council and the municipalities out there know, and I think we do have their support, that we're very dedicated board, very respectful people, working hard to make this thing work. And as Councillor Keith mentioned, our culture, our history is so important, and we have so much to share, and there's so much coming up once COVID is done. So I just wanted to get that out there.
Okay, Councillor Backman had a question as well.
Yes, I just want to state for the record, I do support recreation and culture, and I've said from the inception of my council that I believe everybody should have an opportunity for recreation and culture in the community. I guess when I look at this, I look at the logistics that we have a Stocky Center facility that has had to decrease their staffing because of closure, and then so that's where my question came tonight. And, you know, I do hope that the museum will be able to open in the near future so that people can, once again, utilize that in our community. Thank you.
Anything further with regard to the increase? Ms. Phillips.
Mr. Mayor, I misspoke earlier, so it was, the impact would be 0.003%. So that would be what the impact of the change is, just for clarification.
Figured that might have been needed a couple more zeros, but
yeah.
Anyway, you have the calculator. Okay, so any opposed to rounding that off to $2,000? None? Okay, so I take it everybody's agreeable then for that going to the museum. Okay. Tower Hill Children's Garden. Any comments, discussion on that? Councilor McCann.
I'm just looking for a little bit of background information on this. Perhaps somebody could speak to it.
Sure, through your worship. So this came in some year-end discussions with the Heritage Volunteer or Garden Volunteer Group that does the work at the Heritage Gardens at the Tower site. And they had discussed the possibility of creating a children's garden. So the idea was to include, amongst some other things, archways, a small arch bridge, some seating, decorative items, and more plants. So the garden and exploration area the idea is to enhance the Heritage Gardens Park area and have some additional amenities specifically for, well, not specifically, but geared more to children to explore. So increase activity and stay busy outdoors.
That's good. And when families go up there to make use of the tower or drop into the museum, there's one more. And a lot of people just like to go for a picnic or to walk around. So there's something for the kids to do, another attraction, which is great. Thank you.
Any other comments? No. Anyone opposed to the funding for the garden? Nope. Okay, that's carried too. 4, replace pedestrian bridge at Wabano Beach. Comments, Councilor Borneman.
Mr. Cairns is still with us, I take it. Mr. Cairns, I'm down there quite a bit. Those bridges were designed to carry railroad cars. It's a pretty short span. I realize it's been a number of years. I take it this comes out of the required engineering studies that are done, even though it's pretty highly unlikely that somebody on a bicycle or walking their dog is going to go through there.
Sorry, through your worship, I'll clarify, Councilor Borneman. This is the bridge that goes out to the point through the parkway.
Excuse me.
Sorry, I'll call it the former bridge at this point. So because it was actually removed last year after some significant storm damage. So
okay, excuse me, I was at a different point in the trail.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's okay. And if I could, your worship, I'll just maybe elaborate a little bit on what we're thinking from a staff perspective. Right now, while water levels are not at record highs, they're actually down a bit from last year. They are still quite high over the average in Georgian Bay. And the area in particular, it's not just the bridge that requires some attention out there for replacement. In the memo that went out to kind of explain this situation, there was a photograph, and it kind of shows the point area. There was a significant amount of damage to that point area from some of those storms we had last spring in particular, and there's been some loss of material. So it's felt that probably at this point, it may not be the best conditions in which to consider replacing that bridge. I think we need to understand how much more work is required out there to stabilize that point. And actually part of the point, well, most of the point was underwater last year. So the bridge went out to an area where there was a bench kind of as a lookout. And that bench was actually probably, the majority of it was submerged for the majority of last year with the high water levels. So it's our recommendation that we hold off on this until we better understand the conditions out there and what's appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Kearns. That would be my thoughts on that too. Now, what we might do is we might take and put 20 or 25,000 in a reserve for future, something for the future on that. But as it stands right now, that way, if we do decide to do something out there, we have a little bit of money in the bank to do it instead of a total impact in a year. Councillor Borneman?
So to better understand what we need to do there, Mike, would we be looking for some sort of engineered design? And is there an approval process through Coast Guard or Lands and Forest to undertake that kind of work?
Through your worship, in all likelihood, the answer to the permit process would be yes, because we'll be doing some work, certainly in close proximity, and depending on the water levels, quite possibly within the water itself at some points. So yes, they're probably, we'll certainly explore the need for permits. And as far as engineering design, I think one of the problems was with the existing bridge was the foundation design, which wasn't designed to withstand the impacts that it was receiving. So we want to make sure we don't replicate that next time, that we put it there and it stays. So we'll certainly be evaluating the need and the extent of the need for engineering design going into that. It's a small bridge, but bridges are important, and conveying the pedestrians safely for the long term is what we're looking to do.
So, okay. So I'm going to make a suggestion, since we're not going to do that this year, that we put 25,000 into a reserve that could be used for engineering design or permits, that sort of thing as well. We saved 25,000 from the capital budget. Anyone opposed to that?
Mr. Mayor, perhaps if I could just add a point of clarification. Sure. This 50,000 isn't in the capital budget now because staff weren't recommending it. So okay. If you put 25,000 into a reserve, then that means subject to another source of funding, we'd have to increase taxation by 25,000.
Well then. Okay, I was looking at another line there, and I think, okay, I get it.
So the staff's recommendation would just, if we're not going to do the work this year,
just don't do it.
Just leave it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So any more comments then on this one? No. So any opposed to not doing the work? Nope. That's carried then. We're not doing the work on that one. Next one is remediation erosion of Rotary Sunset Trail. 20,000. Councillor McCann.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to defer to Councillor Borneman in just a moment, but Councillor Borneman and myself met with Bob Griffiths, who was representing Sail Parry Sound, we went down to that point about a week or so ago, looked at it. We get it and we understand that to sort of remediate what was there would only be good money after bad, because the elements would tear it down. But because Sault Perry Sound itself does so much for the area and brings people into town for a number of attractions, including some of the regattas that it's hosted in the past. And I think for the sake of people who visit our waterfront, I think we need to do something with that point, pretty it up a bit and make it a little bit more usable for the students of Sault Perry Sound, but also for those who walk along our shoreline. I'm thinking people coming off the cruise boats or people visiting. This is one eyesore at this point, and I think we could do ourselves proud by trying to reinvent the wheel at this point and figure out what it is we can do to beautify that area, turn it into something that some people can go down there and sit and watch what goes on, watch the sunset. And Councillor Borneman, I'll ask you to take it from here, because I understand you've talked to an engineer friend of yours who had a suggestion that might be a compromise for what we're looking to do there.
Well, I'll only say that the engineer friend agreed with Mr. Kearns that spending, to go ahead there without proper design would be foolish on our part. So I think, Mr. Kearns has had conversation with those folks. I think with the Sault Perry Sound folks, I think, those conversations probably need to, and we need to, much like the previous item, I think we need to come up with a proper plan before we proceed with doing much of anything there. Otherwise, it's just a matter of time before we're back here looking at a revision to the revision, I think. So unless, Mike, you have something further to add.
If I could, through your worship, actually, I was going to suggest that there's been a number of conversations with different representatives of the organization down there. And I think, right now everybody wants to do something, but no one's sure what that is at this point. So I kind of agree with what Councillor Borneman was saying. I think having a good, solid plan going forward is necessary before being able to consider what it is or the costs associated with it. We're not exactly certain what the desired outcome is. I've heard a couple of different visions, I guess, from different representatives down there. But again, I think the biggest thing is it's a very similar situation to the last item with the pedestrian bridge. It experiences the same forces of nature and along there, and that's part of the reason that the work that was put into it by that organization previously is no longer in place. So I think understanding what the desire is and then perhaps how to achieve that and how to fund that is a better plan going forward, would be my suggestion.
I know that makes sense, and that's the reality, and it is what it is. Perhaps maybe within the next year. I don't think we expected to get anything done this year because it does take time to get reports and such. But I'm hoping that we can keep this on the front burner and look at this in the near future. I would ask though about the town's liability, and with the students taking part, it's so rugged down there right now. Are they going to be able to secure a dock for the students for Sault Perry Sound and for whatever else they do, moving ahead with this summer anyways?
Well, certainly I can answer that through your worship. We've reviewed the lease agreement, so it's obviously it's been in place for quite some time. I believe it was 2005 and it expires in 2025. But the wording in the lease agreement does make it clear as to responsibilities and liabilities. So the lease agreement spells out the area in which Sault Perry Sound has leased property from the town. And that includes the area essentially from the edge of the the existing fitness trail out through the point area, including the building that they erected, as well as the sailing compound they have, the lock compound. So the lease agreement currently states that they're required to complete all necessary maintenance and repairs to the area, and that they receive the written permission of the lessor, being the town, for any improvements or renovations or additions. So there is also a clause in there that requires them to carry liability insurance, naming us as a third party on that policy, and that is in place. So with reference to liability, the way the lease agreement is written, the liability for the operation of the facility and the property lies with Sail Parry Sound, from what we understand.
So one last comment then, the light standard that's out there, it looks like it could collapse in another year. Is there something that the town needs to do with regards to that?
Through your worship, certainly I can engage with Sail Parry Sound, but it does appear from the information that I have available that those light standards also belong to Sail Parry Sound down there. So again, I'll have to confirm that. I'm not absolutely certain of that point. Our initial information does show that, however. So we will have to engage them, I guess, as the lease or to the leasee, to make sure that any obvious liabilities are
Okay.
attended to.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Keith?
Yes, I'm just wondering, could $20,000 be put into a reserve? And that way the town would be showing that we are interested in being supportive to Sail Parry Sound, but recognize that it is not the town alone that needs to be contributing to helping out with this problem. And it would be a reserve. So that gives us time to look at and also to work with whether it be partnerships and in addition, Sail Parry Sound with an idea that might possibly be conducive to all parties, but not the town of Parry Sound alone doing anything. But it shows goodwill and that we're interested in being supportive.
Well, that's a possibility. I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to defer to Mr. Harris and Mr. Kearns and possibly Ms. Phillips, because there is extra money coming from the federal government this year. They doubled the gas tax last year. They've got a new name for it this year, but we should be getting almost the same amount of money we got last year, which is not quite expected. So I'm hoping that we're able to do some extra infrastructure work, and this is part of infrastructure. But I do agree that a certain amount should go, but it should be a hand up, not a handout. And they do have some responsibilities down there. So I think that through their contacts and some fundraising with different partners, that they should be able to come up with some extra funds. So that part of it. So question to Mr. Kearns, Mr. Harris, and Ms. Phillips is with regard to the federal funding and taking 20,000 from that and putting it into a reserve for the redevelopment of that area.
To you, Mr. Mayor, what I'd suggest is, in addition, if council wants to put some of that monies aside when it's received from the gas tax, so that avoids raising taxes, council might want to also add to the motion something that indicates what's being discussed this evening by members of council, and that's that Mr. Kern said we need a more detailed plan, understanding exactly what work is being proposed, and whether there's any funding partners. In the request that we got from Sail Parry Sound, there was no indication that Sail Parry Sound was going to put any money into the plan. And I think the Rotary, through a conversation I had, was thinking about they might put in some money. So there's a lot of unknowns that need to come together before we make a commitment. So if you're going to put some money aside, I'd say you'd wrap it into needing more details, including what the plan is and who's going to be participating financially.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Borneman.
Well, the other part of this that's kind of out there is that the fact that the lease expires in 4 years, give or take. And, I would hope that Sail Parry Sound plans to continue, but I don't know that sitting here tonight. And I'm wondering if now's the time to sort of, before we invest a whole lot of money anyplace, that we know where we're going in the future with this as well. Because if someone else were to take control of that property, they may have a totally different vision for it or viewpoint, and we may again be spending money for no real purpose. So I think it's an opportune time to enter into that whole kind of conversation rather than waiting for the last minute.
Sure. No, I think it makes sense. We've got a lot, like everybody said, we've got a lot of unknowns, and we just got to figure where we're going to go with this, and we do it. Councillor Bachman, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I think it's important to understand the vision of Sail Parry Sound and where, what their strategy is to grow in the future. I can't imagine and don't believe from the conversations I've had with this organization that they want to dismantle, other than they want to grow and see Parry Sound as an international sailing community. We obviously have some of the best waters, and there is huge opportunity. And though we have very little land with the recent coming down of the boathouse, and I'd really like to support some type of bigger vision that this can really grow in our community. And we know that it does bring through their events, people to our community, tourism, also recreation. And I think it's important to support this in any way we can.
Okay, so I think if we can come up with some wording, I think that the overall concept that we're looking at is that if we can set a reserve aside with $20,000 in it, utilizing the gas tax fund, although it's got a new name now, and with all of the other things that I think Mr. Harris talked about with regard to, we need to know what that plan is. We need to know where they're going. Councilor Borneman's right. We've got 4 years left or whatever in the agreement around there. So we need to know where they're going to be. Are there other partners as well? And we make this, as I said, a hand up, not a handout. There's got to be skin in the game from the parties involved. Councilor Borneman.
Can we leave this with Mr. Harris, perhaps?
Sure.
To wordsmith the resolution to be brought forward. Thank you.
I'm just trying to generalize what everybody's talked about, so that, because I'm going to ask if anyone's opposed to that. Anyone opposed to that? No? Okay. All right. That's carried. Mr. Harris, it's in your hands.
Thank you.
Okay, next we've got on the next page, page 44, item 6, Georgian Bay Forever Plastic Diversion 2.0 C bin. Mr. Kearns, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure, I can elaborate a little bit on that, I guess. So GBF, I believe they've been in front of council previously, speaking about this diversion 2.0, kind of expanding on the diversion of wastes to our aquatic ecosystems. And so this request is for $3,200 for the purchase of the C bin. So the C bin, just to refresh everyone's memory, is sort of the floating trash bin that is an active system that draws water through a filter system. And in-water looks much like an in-water trash can. And I believe, if I remember correctly, it will filter out down to 2 microplastic or 2 millimeter microplastic. Don't quote me on that. So some microplastics are captured within this, but the floating trash and that is also drawn in. So we've spoken, Chief Thompson and myself, just as far as the waterfront goes, and in terms of, we think there are some viable locations for this and some opportunities there for education as well, with it being probably near the town dock, to attract some attention and be able to further educate folks onto those diversion efforts. And the other part of their request is $5,000 for an educational campaign. So I think, we talked about the location being very important to support that educational campaign. And I think this fits very well with the other things that the town has embarked on, in terms of reducing plastics within our environment. So the other part of this, we've been talking with GBF, is the installation of a trash trap. So they've got funding to supply this. It's a large garbage bag that goes on the end of a storm water outlet. So we're working at identifying a location within the Seguin River for this, and it'll collect any debris that should not be within our stormwater, and trap it from discharging into the river and then subsequently into the bay. So this is kind of a learning process. We're not sure exactly how much that may trap. They've been shown to work very well elsewhere. So this was an opportunity that we will supply some labor to help install and remove this as part of our operations. And I think it's another good learning opportunity for us. We plan on measuring all of the materials captured within each of these exercises so that we can quantify it, and we'll be able to report both to council and to the public in terms of what we were able to capture and divert, and just to give a better idea and hopefully educate folks and start to see less of it showing up so we don't have to catch it at the end.
Good. My question on that one is do we have any kind of a reserve, environmental reserve or something that we could pull that 8,200 from? That question?
Mayor McGarvey, subject to confirmation from Ms. Phillips, I believe the money for this might be in the budget.
Well, it says it's a 0.073 tax rate impact.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this item hasn't been included in the budget.
Right.
But although it is recommended, so it would be a 0.073%.
Yeah. Is there a reserve that we could draw some of that from? And then Councillor McCann has a question.
What we could do is look at what sources might be available, and when we bring the bylaw back to the next council meeting for the approval of the operating and the capital budgets, if there's this tweaking, and there may be a tweaking, something for the Sale Parry Senate as well, we can report then, and we could make those adjustments.
Okay. Councillor McCann?
Sorry, if council votes to add this to the budget, then we'll identify the appropriate source.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I kind of think we have a responsibility to do this and look after our number one resource here in the area. It seems like it's a small price to pay to preserve the future for our children, future generations. So I would support this. I think it's something we need to do.
Ms. Phillips, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I'll just follow up with Mr. Harris's recommendation. Yes, we can come
Okay.
back with some recommendations on how to fund these items. That sounds like a good plan.
Okay, all right. Anyone opposed to that plan? Okay, all right, that's carried then. We'll work on that. The last item I see here is the park-to-park trail increase of 14,000. Councillor Backman?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, so I just want to speak to this. I guess long story short, over the years, Park to Park has been a trail that has is a 200-kilometer trail that goes from Carleen all the way through Lake of Bays. I can't speak before joining this board in 2018, but it appears that many of the partners had fallen off, and leaving Seguin and Parry Sound at the helm. And so over the last few years, we have definitely struggled with maintaining the trail because it had changed its purpose from multi-use to more of an ATV trail, and the sustainability of ATV trails really is very expensive. With many of these trails going through nature, we understand that many bridges are required, and that's where a lot of the costs have been required to maintain. We do work with the Ontario Federation Snowmobiles, who have supported over the years through funding. And but the reality is the level of trail has really diminished because we haven't been able to maintain it. And so in the last, I'd say year, we've been moving towards changing. We've made changes at a board level. There is a new executive that supports growing this trail to what it used to be and bringing back the partners. And we've had discussion with several of the partners, but at this time, we don't really have a lot of the governance in place. The governance is near obsolete, as well as the trail conditions have extremely diminished. So in our efforts to try and bring back, we've realized that we need to focus on two things this year. It really is to fix the trail, bring it to a level that we can market, which Seguin has committed an in-kind contribution of $20,000. Through that, they are going to be using much of their operations department to get some of the fill that they have left over and make investments to the trail. A lot of the trail goes on through Seguin Township, which is a neighboring municipality, but this really is a mechanism and artery to our trail system, which I definitely see expanding and bringing a lot of contribution to the town. And most recently, we've had one of our businesses in the town of Parry Sound reach out to the organization to put on events. And we want to make this accessible by cyclists. And I think that we see this with COVID, the trail systems, we don't have enough trail systems. And, our goal is to really have each municipality maintain their portion of the trail. Sadly, that isn't the case. But in order to do that, we really need to do some administration work and some repairs. And what we've, what this ask really is for is to provide some administration to the operations, to support grant writing, to get our governance in, up to par, and to no longer have this as a liability. But without that, we've had great support backing up. We've had great support from, for instance, McDougall did Councillor Ryman went back to council and fully supported the participation, but their council really wanted to see exactly what we could offer and where we were going. And in order to do that, that's really going to provide, it's going to require some administration. And so, you know, with us being the only municipality that is contributing a cash contribution, you know, I would like to ask Mr. Harris, you know, if there was an opportunity that we would have instead of a full contribution, are there opportunities to have our staff support some of the administration, such as the governance, or are there opportunities to go out for interns, or can we make this contribution to fully support that administration to ensure that we don't lose this asset to the region?
Through the mayor to Councillor Bachman, I guess I'm not really familiar with the types of administrative support that would be required. We don't have a lot of administrative staff in the town itself, so it might be a challenge to provide administrative support. And I don't know what other kinds of services in kind they might be looking for. I think we maintain a very expensive portion of the trail ourselves already. I think in the memo that Mr. Kearns provided on Sale Parry Sound, between the 2020 and the 2021 budget, there's $90,000 for spending on our section of the trail. So I'd have to look at it further to see what we might do to assist the park to park.
Well, at this point, again, just as a follow-up, it really is around the governance. You know, we do have 6,000 that is contributed from the already in the capital budget. If we were to increase that to 10,000, definitely that would be very helpful. I think that, again, Seguin has taken a you know, they have taken an immense measure to ensure that this is an investment that they're willing to make. They've recently gone out with an RFP for a regional, or sorry, for a recreation trail system to connect their communities, which again, this will be another that will also connect to the park to park trail, which connects to the Rose Point Trail, which I understand there's more trail development going eventually after legalities through the Bullwing, which is really going to bring people into our community. And I think that the goal of this is to ensure that every municipality that this trail runs through has it in their trail management plan, and that really isn't the case. And in order for us to get there, obviously the governance needs to be in place. We can't get members back on board with a governance that is obsolete. No one's going to want to step into that. I think that I think that was the same discussion or feedback that came back from Seguin initially, was that they didn't have the human resources in-house to support the administration, but they did have the ability to support through their operations. So, tonight I am asking council to consider this and know that moving forward, this will support also grant writing services for park to park, as well as the governance, and then showing how to grow this. As I stated, most recently we had one of our cycle businesses in the town of Parry Sound engage the park to park organization to utilize the trail for events. When we look historically at what cycling events have done for our community, we go back to pedaling for Parkinson's. Everybody can remember 300 cyclists coming in for a weekend. We do really see that that's where this is going, but we have to ensure that the trail is maintained to a level to support multi-use and no longer just an adventure ATV trail. And it's going to take a little bit of work. It's going to take some strategic planning. And really, those are the resources that we lack. We as a board are trying to support outside of the policy and direction, which is what we're mandated to do. But realistically, we too have suffered the sales of COVID. The trails were closed. But anytime that we have had them open or have been able to have them open, we are moving ahead to support this as a recreational and entity to the region, which then, of course, flows into the town of Parry Sound. So if we weren't able to provide an in-kind service similar to what our neighboring partners have, I would be asking town to support at minimum, $10,000.
Councilor McCann, I'm going to go to you in a minute. So we spend between 2020 and 2021, $90,000 roughly to maintain our portion of the trail, which makes a connecting link between the north and the south and the other. And you're suggesting that you want the town of Parry Sound to look after administration for a trail that's in another community? That trail, Seguin Trail, I'm quite familiar with it, and I've traveled a lot of it. And quite frankly, it does need to be brought back up to a better position than what it was in or currently is in, because some of the portions are absolutely deplorable. And I remember when you could ride a bicycle pretty much from Parry Sound right through to Bear Lake. So, but to all of a sudden ask the ratepayers of this community, which are already paying for a lot of infrastructure and are committed to providing infrastructure basically for the whole area, and they pay for it on their tax bill, to all of a sudden have to look after the administration for a trail that's not even in their community, I can't accept that. That really, Seguin, if they're going to handle, they are the ones that should be handling the administration of that trail, not the town of Parry Sound. As far as money goes, I think we usually contribute around 5,000 or something like that. I don't mind contributing a little bit more, but I don't see anybody helping us with our trail. And we're spending a lot more on a shorter distance than what they are on a bigger distance. So again, the ratepayers of this community happen to bear quite a burden on other stuff, and to ask them to step outside and work on the other, I find it a little bit of a harder pill to swallow. Councillor McCann.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time with this now. I was on the Park to Park board in my last term on council, and I enjoyed working with the folks. A good set of people, and I learned a lot. Mr. Harris mentioned about the use and yourself, Mr. Mayor, about the cost to maintain the fitness trail. Just to be clear, of course, the ATVs are not permitted on that. But I think what we want to do is I think what Vanessa's talking about is the word is multi-use. So walking, jogging, biking, and that sort of thing. And that truly does it. And you'll recall a couple of years ago when the town opened up its roads to let the ATVs into, I think that had a degree of success, and it certainly helped local businesses. I would, on the condition that they turn this thing back into a multi-use trail, would like to support them in some way. And I'd like to give them about the same amount that we have typically in the past. And I think it was around, I don't know, I think the last time we gave them, they asked for a bit of an increase. I think it was 6,000. So that would be the extent of my support at this point.
That'd be about the extent of mine as well. Councillor Backman.
Yeah, just to clarify, this is not the Seguin Trail. This is the Park to Park Trail. Seguin has, taken an investment to fix the trails in their community. But I guess, as I've learned, and again, I don't know what happened, Mr. McCann, while you sat on that board and, the partnerships, nearly became obsolete. I don't know the history of why, but through those discussions, it really was around, the management. And so we've taken great efforts to make the changes that the other municipalities have voiced to hopefully bring this trail back. As I stated, this is a tourism component to Parry Sound, a mechanism that our businesses and ratepayers really utilize outside of our waterfront trail. On any given day, we've seen most recently, at least I have, in walking on our waterfront trails, there's a lot more people out. We are, ratepayers don't know boundaries. They don't know borders. And I think that, that is something that we signed up for this organization many years ago. And just as we've supported other organizations that are regional entities, chambers of commerce, which haven't come to us for an ask this year. Sadly, we are facing the effects of COVID, and we do require a little bit more support due to previous operations within the organization. So I appreciate whatever anybody can support on this. And if there is an opportunity that we can support in kind, I would like to explore that further with staff.
Well, just to follow up, can someone clarify then, what is the Seguin Trail and the Park to Park Trail? I thought I knew the difference. Maybe is
Seguin Trail. The Seguin Trail is pretty much from Rose Point Road up to Bear Lake. It's part of the former Grand Trunk rail line that was torn up and turned into a trail, basically.
Now, is that the part that you could bike on at one point that you were saying?
Yeah, you could bike on it at one point. I used to bike on it at one time. I know other people that did as well. But it's been chewed to pieces right now. My understanding is that with regard to McDougall, I think McDougall looks after their portion of what Park to Park would be, kind of like from Kilbear to Algonquin Park. But my understanding is McDougall looks after their portion as well, like we look after ours. Councillor Bachman, I'm going to Councillor Keith and then Councillor Borneman first.
Thank you. I was just going to say, it seems to me like anything, times change, and there's been changes over the years. It was multi-vehicle, then it was ATV. Now we're looking at governance to get things up to snuff, shall we say, so we can have a better, so there can be a better trail. But, there's no guarantees at this point as to really what that trail will be. There's going to have to be a lot more discussion. And I think when I hear already that basically we're doing a contribution of $90,000, and then I hear a request for another $10,000. That's $100,000, and we look at what our assessment of that the individual is paying. I think this is just too much for the taxpayer of Parry Sound to be paying. That's it.
Councillor Borneman.
So Park to Park started out, as everyone said, many years ago, and it was viewed as a regional asset. And I think it still has the potential to be that. And Mr. Mayor, what you've described is pretty close to correct, where each municipality is taking care of the segment of the trail that lies within its boundaries. So in order to get this thing back on a regional asset footing, I think maybe this conversation should maybe perhaps move to the CINO board. Look to present so everyone is involved with this and contributing in like towards this project or not. And, you know, it would be my thinking that perhaps to get things back where they need to go, that board might consider making application for an intern in order to do the work that Councillor Bachmann is referring to. Share the wealth, share the pain is how I look at this.
Councillor Borneman, that's a really good suggestion. Thank you. Councillor Bachmann.
Yes, as previously stated, in whatever support that we can provide to this organization, whether it is bringing it to the CINO entity, you know, I would support that. I think that the goal of this is, you know, to ensure that this trail is being maintained by all municipalities that it is. And sadly, that may be happening over here, but it might not be happening in other areas and outside of the West Parry Sound area. And that's why it's important to bring those partners back on and through a proper governance and showing them the value that this trail really has, because there's no doubt in a post-COVID economy how important recreation and tourism will be in our survival to our businesses.
Okay, so we have 14,000 in there. Councillor Horn, sorry.
Thank you. I guess my question is, where is the province come into play, and where does Explorer's Edge come into play? And I would need to see a plan about what is governance. What are you talking about in terms of governance? Like, I would like to see a detailed plan about the direction of the board of directors to put together. $14,000 is a big ask for a governance portion for getting the work done that moves the agency forward. So I'm along the same lines as Councillor Keith. I just can't see us spending any more money than what we've already put into maintaining our trail system.
Okay, so there's 14,000 in there, but I think Councillor McCann mentioned 6,000. I think that's typically what we had given in the past. I'm going to put it, Ms. Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to mention that 6,000 is currently in the budget, so that you're aware of that. So this ask for 14,000 would be in addition to what's in the budget, but council can make its determination and knowing that 6,000 is in there currently.
So we're not going to affect the budget by just accepting what's in the budget currently.
Yes, which is 6,000. So if you add the increased amount, it will impact it, but 6,000 won't impact the increase for your information.
Okay. So I'm going to ask yes or no, 14,000 in or out. Those in favor of, those opposed to adding $14,000 to the budget. Those in favor. Okay. $14,000 is not added to the budget. There was one in favor. So we will give them their $6,000 contribution that we would normally give, and the budget remains pretty much the same. Ms. Phillips, is there anything more that we need to deal with on this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are no more items for consideration, but there are just a few sections under the non-tax supported sections that may have some key items to mention, which I can mention pretty quickly.
Okay. Yeah.
So land ambulance has increased funding for community paramedicine long-term care grant, which is $904,000. So the costs there have increased by the corresponding amount. So that's the impact there since that's been approved. POA facility rental costs are down by $50,200. Fine revenues there are expected to be down by $236,000. So that's the forecast for reduced revenues is based on actuals and observed trends for ticket issuance. So this area in particular has been impacted by COVID-19, but it's municipal supported by a group of municipalities in West Parry Sound. Contracted service costs are expected to be down $3,500. Payment fines paid to the province and other municipalities are expected to be down by $136,000. And then the Stocky Center, I mentioned many of the impacts and reductions there related to the Stocky Center, so I won't go through that again. Water and wastewater systems. So these budget items have been updated in accordance with the new water financial plan and the rate study that was approved. And those areas are also impacted by insurance premium increases of $8,738 for water and $8,690 for wastewater. So that concludes the overview of the non-tax supported items. And unless council has any questions, I think that concludes the budget presentation.
Councilor McCann had a question.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the right time to mention it or not, but yeah, Mr. Kearns and I exchanged a couple of emails, and some time back I had asked about improved lighting at the intersection of Bow Street and Pine. And I guess there's a lot of physical barriers to that, but it sounds to me like it's worth exploring some different type of lighting that we might be able to put in place. And I don't know, is that something that we can move ahead without including in this year's budget? And Mr. Mayor, you mentioned the gas tax, or whatever they're going to call it, because this falls under transportation or infrastructure. Maybe there's monies there that we could use for that intersection. I really, really would like to see that lit up. It's a dark spot. Okay. So I don't know if Mr. Kearns, I get what the limitations are there, but I'm hoping we can be really creative.
So if you've got a seconder, why don't we have some direction, okay, that the lighting be investigated and costing done on that. At least we get that looked at.
That'd be wonderful.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Councillor Keith? Any further discussion on that? No. So anyone opposed to that direction? No one's opposed. Okay, that's carried.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
It can be investigated and we can take a look at it. I do have, following up on Councillor Borneman's suggestion with regard to park-to-park trail, I'd like to see some direction from council that that what he suggested with regard to putting this over to CINO to see if there's an intern that could be hired, or a grant or something that would help with some of the administration or whatever with park-to-park trail, but also put it out there to the CINO group with regard to maybe they can access some extra funding or something, do whatever. But I think that this is more of an area thing that needs to be looked at. And I liked his suggestion with regard to that. And if Councillor Borneman would move that direction,
Can I make a comment on that, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I think, like, I'm all in favor of making that motion, but I think that conversation has to be stronger. If this is a regional asset, that's the time that some of these folks, other folks who have opted out, have to opt back in, or we're beating the dead horse, as they say. Like, we can't make other people participate in something, even if we want them to. So I think that all has to be part of that conversation.
Sure.
Sorry, Mr. Harris, for for putting that on your plate.
But if we can have that direction to do that, then I think it's a step forward.
Sure, and I'll make that motion. Thank you.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councilor McCann.
Second it, yeah.
Okay. Any discussion on the direction?
Well,
Councilor McCann.
Yeah, just a comment, if we had a two-tier government or regional government, this is exactly the thing that those levels would be looking at. So I think it's a wonderful idea. I never would have thought of it.
We had an amalgamated municipality, it would do the same thing. Doesn't have to be
absolutely.
Doesn't have to be two-tier.
I just tried to sound like I knew what I was talking about.
Okay, yeah. All right. Any further comments on that direction? No? Okay. Any opposed to it? Nope. Okay, that's carried. Okay. Any other bit with the budget? Because we've got 2 minutes before the hour before we turn into pumpkins or whatever. So, Ms. Phillips.
I just wanted to send out a quick thank you to my staff for all their help in compiling the budget, because a lot of people provide assistance in preparing the document and all the changes throughout the budget. So just shout out to my manager of accounting, Suzanne Diller, and Rob Beaumont, and all the other staff that have been helping to get this pulled together.
I agree. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you on behalf of council to all the staff as well for doing this, and council for their work on it. So I've got moved by Councillor Bachman, second by Councillor McCann, that the 2021 operating budget as amended be approved, and that the budget bylaw be submitted to the April 20th, 2021 council meeting for ratification. Any discussion? Anyone opposed to that resolution? Good, that's carried. No one's opposed. Okay. Moved by Councillor Bachman, second by Councillor McCann, that bylaw number 2021-7118, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council, be considered as read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? That's carried. Moved by Councillor McCann, second by Councillor Bachman, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Any opposed? Nope, no one's opposed. That's carried. Before I read the adjourning, I just want to thank everybody for their patience and discussion and trying to work for the residents and ratepayers of this municipality. So that's council and staff. So prior to adjourning, I'd like to offer the following information to the public regarding the next council meeting. The next regular meeting of council for the town of Parry Sound is scheduled for Tuesday, April the 20th, 2021 at 7 p.m. The meeting will be held via Zoom video conferencing and will be live streamed and recorded. All regular council meetings are held at 7 p.m. on the first and third Tuesday of each month, except January and August, where only one regular meeting is scheduled. The council meeting schedule, notices of special council meetings, complete agendas and minutes, and instructions on accessing live streamed and recorded council meetings are all posted on the town's website. Go to www.parrysound.ca under news and public notices. Your TV airs council meetings on Saturday at 9:30 a.m. following a regular council meeting. And for Cogeco listings, contact www.yourtv.tv. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.